So welcome, as we say, very excited about shared voices in conversation with us today. And we've just gone through the housekeeping, and we're now going to move into the meat and the potatoes of our session. I am, of course, Greg Frankson. I am the founder and CEO of VoiceShare Inc., which is the organization which has organized this. So whether you came to us through Facebook, through LinkedIn, through a referral, or through the website, we're very excited and very pleased to have you be part of this, which is our second bi-monthly version of Shared Voices in Conversation. We do have a Facebook group and a page on LinkedIn that you can follow along with us to find out about future events, initiatives, and programs that we provide. So please be sure to check that out. Throughout the course of the hour, you'll see that information dropped into the chat box. And so now, I am going to introduce our fantastic and amazing special guest today, who is Teresa Vozza, who is, of course, joining us from Allianz Global Assistance Canada, where she serves as Chief Human Resources Officer. Should also make a note that she is also a mindset coach, does an incredible work, particularly with women, and which is part of what ended up fueling us to take up the subject matter that we're taking on today, which of course is talking about, how do you approach communicating when you are the other? And so let me just bring our wonderful guest into the conversation today. Thank you so much for being with us, Teresa, and welcome to Shared Voices in Conversation. If you just want to quickly just say a few words of welcome and introduction. Well, we've got you muted, unfortunately, Teresa. We can't hear you. Weird. No. Unfortunately, I can't hear you. Can others hear Teresa? No. I don't know what happened. We could hear you just fine when we logged in earlier, but for some reason we cannot hear you. No, I don't know what's going on. That's very weird. Let's try that again. Okay, so while Teresa is messing,
I think we got it.
Oh, there we go. Okay, perfect.
I think we got it. This is the first rule of being in a boardroom, is just when something happens, you run with it and you just stay calm. Anyways, as I was saying, Greg, thank you so much. Welcome everybody for coming to VoiceShare. The work that Greg does is so important here, and I'm so pleased to be here to talk about a topic that is so near and dear to my heart. Having been considered the other for a great portion of my career, I am just so excited to be here.
Well, that's fantastic. And thank you so much for being here with us today, Teresa. And you know what, without any further ado, let's just get into the conversation that we're going to have today. And again, we're talking about the other, and we want to make sure that folks have an opportunity to sort of hear some of the experience and some of the perspectives and things that you've dealt with. And so I guess maybe we could just begin by, you talking about, like, what does it mean to be the other in a workplace kind of scenario, and what can that look like depending on what kind of othering is involved?
That's a great question, Greg. For me, the other was oftentimes, I would say I spent probably 70% of my career being the only woman on an executive team, the only woman on a senior team. And I'm going back probably 15 years ago. I have been the only woman only up until the last year. In the last year, there were 2 more women that were hired on our senior team. And that is still 3 out of 9 people. So the scale is not quite even, obviously. But for me, it was always being very aware that as I walked into a room, I was I stuck out, and I stuck out because there was a sea of males, and there were many times, as I've shared with others in different talks, where I was mistaken as the assistant, or I was asked to grab coffee or to take notes. And I wish I could tell you this happened only once or twice, but it still happens, until I really learned how to create strong boundaries. So for me, it was that experience. But as an HR leader, I can also say it's also, for example, if someone's part of the LGBTQ community and they're a part of a department and there's a big meeting. I've had members of LGBTQ come to me and say, I feel like I am the only one, I am a part. So that would be another example. In HR, or even just women or men of color, you're in a big room and you walk in and you realize that you're the one only other person that doesn't look like everybody else. And so already you feel a sense of otherness from the rest of the crowd. So that can be a very difficult place to be.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I mean, obviously, you're also a human resources professional in your main work.
Yeah.
And so can you talk a little bit about how you maybe have seen over the years how some of this has sometimes materialized, and what kind of impact it can have in a workplace?
Yeah, well, the example that really comes to my mind is, when you're in a group of people or you're in a meeting, oftentimes, I've had female counterparts come to me and say, when you're called upon to give an opinion or to give a proposal, the male would be called upon first. It would look like, jokes being made around the boardroom, or, comments around, hey, do you want to go get a beer after work? And, speaking directly to the 2 or 3 people at one side of the table and completely ignoring the individual at the end. I've seen it in terms of we're having small talk, as we all do when we enter into a room, and getting to talk about what we did in the weekend or so on. And someone mentions how they saw an attractive girl, or someone walks by the room and all the men turn to look at her. And so, it looks like that, or it looks like kind of like hidden bias comments where, people have come in and said things like, well, I'd like to offer so-and-so the promotion. And when, as an HR leader, we've asked questions around, well, have you scanned the entire organization to see who has the skills and talents? Oftentimes the answer is no. They have a set person in mind that they want to bring to the table. And we have got to do a lot of work educating leaders to provide fair and equitable interviewing and treatment across all those who may be interested. And a lot of organizations still haven't done that right.
Yeah, and you definitely do see that come up. Certainly, I've heard those kinds of things from women that I know, definitely from people of color, especially Black and Indigenous folks that I know, raising that as a real serious issue. How do we practically go about the process of creating systems inside organizations that are going to value the diversity and allow folks to walk into rooms and not feel like the other, but to feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves, to which everyone has an equal stake?
Yeah, it's such an important question. I'll say this first and foremost. I think where organizations are going wrong is they're focusing on metrics first, as opposed to listening first. We have got to start listening. And I think that is where, oftentimes people just want to be able to show on a scorecard what looks good, as opposed to actually remembering the humanity of an organization and recognizing the humanity of people, and really coming to understand what's different for you. How can I help? What do I need to learn? What are some ways in which I can do that? What do I not know? Like, what are some of the hidden biases that even the most evolved of us may have that we don't even know that we have? Like, so some of that subconscious beliefs, and because I'm a mindset coach, I deal a lot with the subconscious, and a lot of what you don't know is happening below the surface, and really getting to that level, I think, is crucial. But the other thing I would say is, so listening culture first and foremost before you implement any measures, because you have to first understand. But I would also say, on a very practical day-to-day level, I'm a big believer in leading without apology, creating boundaries, knowing what your boundaries are, and ensuring that you follow them, and that you make it very clear, and you call people out in a very respectful way. Because a lot of times we don't do that. And I understand why. There's fear, there's, I might get fired, or I'm going to get in trouble, or they're going to write me up. But I think that is one area where the tide is turning. I think the focus on inclusivity is at least gotten to a point where now there is some, room to listen and to actually dig a little bit more into what some of the hidden biases might actually be. So I think it's like, I always encourage, whether it's a person of color, LGBTQ, Indigenous, or a woman, anyone that considers himself in the other category, to really get a clear sense of who they are and to really own that space. And I really work with women on their self-image, so that their voice actually comes across with conviction, and it's not coming from a defensive stance. It's coming from I'm going to educate stance, which has a different flavor to it than a defensive stance.
Yeah, let's dig into that a little bit more, because I think one of the things that's really awesome about who you are and the kind of work that you're doing is that you really are working on going deep into what are some of those presuppositions that people are operating from, those underlying self-limiting beliefs and self-deprecations that are actually not helpful. And so as you work with your client base, which I understand is mostly women, but of course many of these methods would have beneficial usefulness for others as well. Maybe talk a little bit about what are some of those kinds of beliefs that you see, and how do you break through those?
Yeah. Oh, gosh. Well, for one thing, let me just be very clear that I've lived through this too. So I'm not coming at this from, hey, I'm the expert, although I've never experienced this. So I just want to make that very, very clear, because I think it's important that we come across as real humans. And so, growing up, I was the only girl in a constellation of men, uncles and cousins and so on. And I was always kind of pitted as the only girl, and they make it seem all like doo-doo-doo, like you're so special because you're the only girl. And there was this image of me being this special little fragile person out there in the corner. And so I had to really fight against that, because even my father, my brothers, and everyone had very strong patriarchal type of views. And in growing up in my career, I've had to, I had panic attacks, I had anxiety attacks, earlier on in my executive career because of my inability to claim my voice. So I just want to say that just so people know I'm not just some girl on the screen talking nonsense. But what I will say is, to get back to your question, is a lot of the beliefs we have are, one, for example, I see this a lot with women. I can't say no. I don't know how to say no. So there's a real fear that if I say no, or if I stand up for myself, I will get fired or I will be treated differently. So I think that's one that I see a lot of. I also see a lot of proving yourself. I get a lot of female clients that come to me and say, well, I feel like I have to prove myself more. So whether that, looks like working extra hours, or, volunteering for every project that comes into the function, because they have to overcompensate for the fact that they are a female and may have to work harder to be treated the same, or to get that promotion, if you will. So I think those would be an example of a couple of different beliefs. I could go on, there's many, but those are the two I really hear a lot of. I have to prove myself, and that, I'm somehow going to get in trouble if I raise my voice.
Yeah, it's interesting. Some of what you said there, I've heard some of that in the Black community. and perhaps in other communities of color. And it gets expressed as, in order to have half as much, you have to work twice as hard, right? And it's
Yeah.
something that we've been taught even as youngsters coming up, trying to make our way in the world so that we can be prepared when we encounter these kinds of barriers. And so when you walk into a room and like right off the top, it's like, maybe you're a little bit behind the eight ball, so to speak, in terms of being able to advance, progress, and to be taken seriously. And then there's that whole other piece of, if I speak up too loudly, if I am too resistant or argumentative, then I come across as angry. I come across as hostile.
Yeah.
I come across as, one of those big B words if you're a woman, And so there's a lot of that kind of dialing back that you sort of do this kind of self-moderation to make sure that you don't get perceived in that kind of a way, right?
Yes. Oh, you're absolutely right. There's a real holding back. Unfortunately, when we hold back too much, we internalize. And so then we internalize that resentment, we internalize that anger, we internalize that inability to speak, and it actually turns on us, as women, as a person of color, and so on and so forth. So I think that's the thing. It's like, how do we lead and live with, I like to call it, with unapologetic influence, where you are influencing the environment as opposed to coming at it from a place of, I know it all. It's like, there's a very big difference from leading with influence versus kind of shrinking back and, just saying yes or sure or sorry. Like, there's a lot of things that, especially as females, which is my experience, we don't do ourselves a service when we over apologize, or when we shrink back, or when we play small. And so learning how to express yourself in such a way where you are authoritative but also likable, because I do believe that we want to show our humanity as people, but not at the expense of our credibility and our respect.
Right. And I think that sort of comes back to one of the comments that we got in the chat box around boundaries. And I think that what you're talking about is really influenced by that whole process of boundary setting, not just the boundaries that you've set, but also the boundaries that you would expect to have set within a work environment, by the leadership, by other members of the teams, through the operations and the way that they're set up. So, the question in the chat box was, what do boundaries look like for you at your workplace? So maybe you could use that as an example of what we're talking about here.
Yeah, for sure. I'll give an example of a boundary, but also give an example of a really tangible action that you can start doing right away. So one of the things that I have made a decision a long time ago to not do was to say sorry in the terms of overqualifying. Like, so sorry, but I don't agree. Or sorry, but can I just come over, or can I interrupt you? Like, none of that. So I don't say sorry, because sorry implies that you're wrong. And that, from a subconscious level, can have an impact on the way you internalize beliefs about yourself. So I really reserve the right to use sorry when it's actually warranted, like a true affront that we have made. So that's one thing. A boundary that I've created is that my family comes first, always. And I would counsel any high achieving woman that if you have a clear boundary around family, even if it's not family, even if it's just yourself, that you have to attend to something like an appointment or whatever, you hold it. And it looks like this. It looks like, oh, Teresa, can you, can I ask you to stay late to finish that report, which I've been asked 1,000 times. Me 3 years ago would have been like, yeah, sure, no problem. And me now would be like, you know what? I'm unfortunately unable to make it. I have a commitment that I need to make. If you want my best work, you'll get it in the morning. How does that sound? And I say it with such conviction that it's not questioned, because I am firmly grounded in the belief that I am a confident, capable woman who has a very clear line about what I will and will not do. And you know what? There's plenty of other people on the team that you can ask as well. I think one of the things that I'm guilty of is that I used to be always like raising my hand, I'll do it, I'll do it, I'll do it. And so they have come to expect that from me. And so I've had to now unlearn this way of being. So now they're almost kind of surprised, but now they know that, you know, if Teresa has a commitment, she'll get it to you later.
Yeah, that's right. And just letting people understand, I think, what your perspective is and what you hold to be important. I think it's a really strong signal to folks that you are unapologetically yourself on
Yes.
top of everything else, right? And so if you can be unapologetic in how you express yourself, but also unapologetic in how you carry and manage yourself,
Yeah.
it's those combinations that require everyone else in the space to think about, hey, you know, we've been othering this person who is strong, who is capable, who is together, who knows her boundaries, who knows her abilities. Maybe we need to sort of think about how to reframe that. And, you know, and speaking about reframing, it's something that I've seen where people get othered and they accept the othering and then behave thereafter as an other. So what would you recommend in terms of like not taking on the personality of the othered person and being set aside? You know, how do you avoid that? You know, do you have any tips or advice on that?
I always start with self-image. So I always start with having a very grounded, written down self-image script is what I call it. My clients and one is on this call knows very well that I'm a big believer on that. And self-image for me means like placing yourself in the position of the woman that you are, having achieved all of your goals. And if you act from that place and you create a script that says, I am, enter whatever those adjectives are. So for example, I'm a self-confident, strong, courageous woman who speaks my mind. Because I'm also a neurolinguistic practitioner, the repeated action of saying those words day after day and writing them down, at one point in time, you're going to wake up and actually believe it, because what's happening is you're rewiring the neural pathway that is, you know, has a different belief. So I really believe that if you really focus on acting as if you're the woman, I'm using woman because that's my experience, that you want to be, or that you, as if you already are, then you won't fall into that trap as easily. For me, I did that too. You know, there were times in my career where I played coy, or, you know, I would giggle, or I would, you know, I could tell that there was a misplaced attention and I didn't do anything about it because I rationalized that that's just, you know, I can't do anything about it, you know, and just kind of like pushed it away. But now that is so opposite of the self-image I have of myself that now when I walk into a room, you know, they don't dare go there with me because they know that I'm coming in and I'm like, you know, respected. And that is the image I portray. But I would only have done that if I really, really started to work on the belief system underneath it all. Or else it's just an action plan without real change. So I'm a big believer in you have to rewire the thoughts in order to have effective change.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's huge. And I think it actually does lead quite nicely into a question that we got in the chat, but I'm going to actually ask Martine to ask that one on camera. So I'm going to bring her into the spotlight. And yeah, please go ahead and ask your question, Martine, and let's continue the conversation.
Hi, Martine.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. So this is a question, something I see common in every either work or environment or departments or whichever workplaces, where people seek achievement for achievement's sake and believing hard work will compensate for a lack of genuine interest. Is that something that you've seen in the work
Say the last
environment?
part again. Hard work will compensate for what?
For a lack of genuine interest.
Genuine interest.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. You know what I think, Martine? I think that once your intuitive factor is really dialed in, you know it. Like, you know when people are just trying to achieve and there's ego around it versus achieve from a place of, I really want to do the best work. So I always, for me, what I do with my clients anyway, is I really help sharpen their intuitive factor, like, you know, your intuition and what does that look like, and really sharpening those mental faculties, because with practice, you can kind of see that a mile away. But the other thing I'll say is that when I do see it, I have a mantra where I stay in my own lane, right? So I focus on myself being indispensable with boundaries, and, you know, whatever that other person might do, it's almost like, this is going to sound rather, you know, flippant, but it's none of my business. It's simply none of my business because I can't control them. However, because I have done so much work sharpening my faculties, I can see it. And being in HR, it also means that, you know, when we have to look at individuals for promotions or progression or so on, we will likely, if that's happening, take a pass on that individual, or we'll provide coaching for him or her to be able to understand the impact they're making on others and that genuine versus real achievement. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's really great. Thank you so much, Martine, for jumping in and asking that question. That's great.
Oh, no problem.
All right. So, Teresa, you know, we've got all kinds of great, wonderful people here who have joined us here for this conversation. You know, we're about halfway through our session, so I'm just going to go back and encourage folks who are sitting here on the live feed. If you've got questions, please, by all means, drop them into the chat box or raise your hand, and we can bring you in and we can continue this. Because the great thing about this session is that we really do want to make it as conversational as possible. So if you want to join in on the conversation, just let us know and we'll pull you in. So having said that, let's continue, Teresa. And this has been really great so far. I am super interested in learning a little bit more about how you decided that mindset coaching was how you were going to be able to help to impact, developing leaders and folks who are in workplaces trying to achieve things. So maybe just talk a little about your philosophy of mindset coaching and how it can impact on making sure that people don't feel othered and that they can find their way into being a place of belonging in their workplaces. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah. The reason I like mindset coaching versus other types of coaching, and to be very general, to me, coaching is all about change, right? It's about evoking a change of some kind. I have seen countless times through my executive career and even just through life that when habits are being formed, or my battery's running low here. Oh my goodness. We'll just hopefully give me 1 second, Greg. I just want to make sure I have this charged up. Okay.
No problem.
Give me 1 moment.
All right. So while Teresa's fixing that up, I just also want to make very clear to folks, when we talk about othering, we're not just talking about necessarily about physical identifiers. So if you're a person with a disability, or you're you've got a different, you're a person of a different color or a different gender, or or a sexuality. It can also be about social status. It can also be about things that are less visible, things that are less obvious, that you just come from a different experience of other people that you're working with. And you go into those situations, and as people become aware of who you are and where you come from, where you start to get othered because those are those kinds of experiences. I think it's important to say that, in that kind of context, these lessons, these tips, these things that we're sharing in a discussion, they can be as applicable in those sorts of situations as they could be on anything that might be in, an identifiable ground under human rights law or something like that, which is the kind of thing that people often think about and talk about when we talk about being othered. Being othered is just, you're not the person who's being treated as being core and central to what the broader group wants or how they operate or how they behave, right? So just want to make sure we're clear on that. So we'll bring you back in, Teresa. So you're good. I'll let you continue on your train.
Wow, you're doing so well. You just keep going. But yeah, no, I was just going to say that with mindset coaching, because I've seen so many changes not go well, and because I've seen so many people stop and start. I became really fascinated by, well, why is that? Like, what is it that's stopping people who know they need to change in some regard, and yet, even with the best action plan and to-do list, they kind of fall back after a certain amount of time. And so the reason I went into mindset is because it really kind of digs deeper. So it really is more about what are all the patterns of thinking that have supported the actions that you're taking. So it's very much a study of the conscious and the unconscious mind. So we only know what we know. The conscious mind just just does what the subconscious mind tells it to. So the mindset coaching is really understanding those beliefs, behaviors, and actions that are under the surface that you may not even be aware are driving your behavior. And so when you start to look underneath the covers, if you will, you find that a lot of work needs to be done at the belief level in order to achieve the results that somebody wants. So mindset coaching just helps you get there faster, because we're not spending too much time just giving you action plans and 12 steps to freedom or whatever is the jour de the day of the, I don't know, self-help movement, if you will, which again, nothing wrong with it. I love a lot of it, but I want to understand how people are thinking and try to get into their subconscious beliefs and replace them with beliefs that are going to serve them further. So that's why I think mindset coaching is just so much more powerful, and it's the only style of coaching that has worked for me. No, you're on mute.
Sorry, yeah, it's really powerful and says so much about what we about what we're covering today. Sorry about that. I have been, I've been taking we've got a couple questions that have come up in the chat too. So I'm going to bring Andrew on, and he's gonna join our conversation as well. So Andrew, go ahead and ask your question. Thanks, man. Thanks for being here.
Hey, Teresa. Hey, Greg. Thank you so much. Yeah, I have a question from a diversity and inclusion point of view, because you're actually involved in the hiring process, right at ground zero. Socially responsible investing has grown a huge amount. It's grown into $1 trillion industry in the last few years, multiple trillion. Have you actually felt the influence of that from the C-level executive suite in the hiring process? I'm just fascinated if their point of view is we should have diversity and inclusion because it's good for the company, or we should have diversity and inclusion because that's what the trend, the socially responsible investment thing is becoming all the rage. And I'm just, because, I have that side of my business and we have all these reports and PDFs, but it would be fascinating to talk to someone, at ground zero, actually improving the metrics of diversity and inclusion. And if you've encountered that during your day-to-day.
Yeah, the honest answer is not as much, but that doesn't mean that it hasn't come up. It is coming up. Before I became involved with Allianz, I was part of cooperators, and cooperators, if many people may or may not know, they're a Canadian insurer, but they are highly conscious of corporate social responsibility and sustainability. And I will have to say, they're the one organization, because I've worked with them for so long, that really, truly means it. It's not just a metric. This is something that is important to all of their members and their credit unions, as well as to their employees. It's a real felt choice. So the reason I bring that up is because it raises hope. It's hopeful because it's not just a scorecard item. And I'm with you, Andrew. Like, I really detest let's just do it because it's good for the business.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I honestly think we're a long ways away from getting there on that front yet. And the reason I say that is because while diversity and inclusion is gaining attention and momentum, the social response, the investing part, or the social responsibility investing, there's still a bit of okay, like you can only throw too much of this at us at one time. Like, let's just focus over here first. And it's not to say that it's right. It's to say that that's what I'm hearing. But I do think that that's the next level. So the next level of understanding what that means, not only for our organization, but for our planet and for the, and for the world at large, and for our communities. So I think that, I'm not sure if that's what you do specifically as your side business, but keep at it. There are individuals that want to hear more about it and organizations that want to hear more about it. But right now, they're like still pandemic head. Like, they're still like, let's get out of the pandemic. Let's make sure we're not losing any more money. And they're still in that era. But the time is coming.
Mm-hmm.
The time is coming. Cooperatives is a great example.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you. How does that land for you, Andrew?
No, it's great. And my hope is that it's not my full business, but it's a part of business. And I'd love it to be my full business, but it gives me hope that someone I've never met before that is involved in the hiring process is aware of it. That means it is permeating into the kind of social construct, and for the right reasons, not just because it's some flavor of the month silly type of metric, because it actually brings positive change to companies. So thank you.
It's happening. It's coming.
Yeah. And I think the big part there too is just to highlight, that we need to make sure that people are making these kinds of changes because they're important to be done, and not simply because it's important to be seen. If they hand the sheet out that has all the little boxes checked off that says, oh yeah, we had an unconscious bias training, and oh yeah, we talked about Indigenous awareness, and oh yeah, we had some sexual harassment training, and and all the checkbox have been marked.
Yeah, I'm with you, Greg. That's a big pet peeve of mine. And I feel like if I feel like that's the flavor of the conversation, I almost stop it right there, because that is not the point. And so I think that is where we still have a long way to go in education. It's moving, but it's not fully there.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks so much, Andrew. Thanks for dropping in. And the next person we're going to bring in, we're going to bring Portia into the conversation.
Hi,
she had a question that she had in the, so go ahead and ask your question, Portia.
Thanks, Greg. So my question is around the pandemic and the current flavor, which I think has brought out some new xenophobia in everyone, even though it has had some positive impacts, unifying impacts too. But, where we're being kind of forced to stick to our bubbles and almost fear people because of germs, I've noticed new dynamics in the workplace. So I was wondering whether, going into this point of the pandemic, you have made any such observations yourself. And my specific question is around how can we disarm people who may be feeling new types of xenophobia at the other end of the webcam or the board table? Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's a really important topic. And you're right, Portia, that the pandemic has really almost divided people in some ways too, right? Like it's been very unfortunate because everything from do you vaccinate, do you not vaccinate, like all of it has created all this division. I think in the organization that I see, the one that I'm part of, and also just in the circles that I run in, there is still, it's more in the minority than it is in the majority that people don't want to come together. However, this whole bubble thing that we're seeing, that seems to kind of go up and down with where the virus is at. You know, I'm seeing it already happening again now that we're talking about the Delta variant. And I think what I'm trying to encourage is people is to be educated listeners, both in the workplace and outside of the workplace. So be very, very selective about what information you take in. I'm a big believer that you need to be very selective of the information you listen to. So for example, I don't listen to CNN. I just don't listen to CNN. It's a personal decision of mine. I don't like it. I just don't do it. So I make a conscious decision to listen to publications or broadcasts that have balanced views on both sides of the table, so that I come at it from a place of learning and being teachable versus coming out with a strong opinion on one thing and then going and telling person what my strong opinion is. That's just not my style. My style is to open up the conversation, disarm people's sense of division. And I think division gets disarmed the more time we spend together listening. Like deep listening is an art, and it's not being practiced in the way that it needs to be. And if politics has anything to say from the last 4 or 5 years, you've seen that, right? We're not listening to each other. We're angry and we want to be right. And I think like being a right finder is not going to help us. So I don't know if I exactly answered your question, but I think the question is about division. And I think the only way we can disarm division and this bubble mentality that we've created is to start deeply listening to people and really choosing who you want to have in your news feed, if you will, because social media is and can be very, very harmful. Does that help, Portia?
Very helpful. Thank you. I'm with you on the CNN point as well. Thank you.
I don't know if I should have said that or not, but I did.
Yeah, there's no need for CNN, man. We can forget all about that. So that's awesome. We've got a hand up from Lynn. And so Lynn, I'd like to bring you into the spotlight here, and you can go ahead and ask your question.
Hi. From Montreal, so I'm really happy to be here. But something that really stood out to me, what you said, and it's also to build off of your last answering the question, is unapologetic influence. Mm-hmm. So I'm interested in knowing what are some of the qualities, especially with like such a variety of different opinions and approaches to life, and like, so what are some of the personal qualities that you have to kind of keep in mind when you are trying to consistently be unapologetic like influence?
Yeah, no, great question, Lynn. So it's interesting you should say that. I'm actually doing a masterclass in 2 weeks exactly about that, living and leading with unapologetic influence. But so if you're interested, there's a whole lot of information coming your way at that masterclass. But I will answer you this. For me, unapologetic influence is, we touched upon it before, know your boundaries. So what are your very clear boundaries around work, around your personal life, and around any other important aspect of your life? So what are those non-negotiables? So that's number one. Number two is, I would say, the art of saying no, like the art of being able to say no in a way that is heard and respected versus not taken seriously. And when you live unapologetically, what that means is that because you have such a grounded self-image, which is the third point I'll make, that you have rehearsed and read and socialized into your mental being on a day-to-day basis, you don't make apology for who you are and for how you express yourself. You make an apology when it's warranted. If you've genuinely hurt someone, then you make an amend. And in my masterclass, I talk about like, when is it really warranted? And when is it, me just being sorry for, potentially saying something that could have offended you. That is not unapologetic influence. That is mind reading. That's assumption-based thinking. That is fear. And so we need to get to the root of those things in order to know the difference between what that is and what that isn't. But Lynn, you're welcome to join the masterclass, and it's in 2 weeks. I don't know, Greg, if we mentioned that or not, but it's free. It's 5 days. It's 1 hour each day, and that's all it is what does that actually mean, and how does that look like in practice?
Yeah, we can definitely make sure we email that out and post it in our group as well, Teresa. But I think that that's really powerful. And Lynn, what's really interesting is, as I listen to Teresa, it's funny because the voice share method, the method that I use of effective communication, the very first thing that we talk about is about, speaking without apology. And I talk at great length around the process of sabo-frauding, which is to say that, you believe yourself to be a fraud. And so from bubbling up from your subconscious, you will behave and say things in such a way that it will sabotage any attempt you have to get moving forward. And so I think Teresa and I are very much on the same page in that respect, that the big thing is to overcome that tendency to sabo-fraud and to introduce what I call apology openers, where you apologize for what you're about to say before you say it, and thereby invalidate it in advance. And so we want to try to train that out. So that's that whole don't say sorry. You don't need to apologize for who and what you are. And just moving forward, eliminate those apology openers and stop sabo-frauding yourself. So thanks for jumping in there, Lynn. Really appreciate the question.
Thanks, Lynn.
All right. And so we see that there's a question in the chat box. I'm looking like I'm gonna bring Sarah in here if she's cool with that. And I see her fixing her hair, and so she's ready to go. And and Sarah, so if you could ask your question directly to Teresa, that'd be great.
Well, you mentioned politics, and because of, I'll just use a sort of political example in the Toronto. I thought that Olivia Chow was going to win because my news feed was built by that sort of lefty leaning side. And so I was surprised when she didn't. And I feel like since then, I've tried to sort of do the opposite of blocking CNN and listen to it against my better judgment, because it helps me understand what it's like on the other side of the coin, so to speak. And, I don't know if this is just masochism or something, but it's definitely something that I am actively trying to do, is to not only see things from my bias, which is the pro-feminist, anti-patriarchal, et cetera, but also see it from what it's like to, like put my racist shoes on, which is a really awful thing to say, but how can I get them to move forward without understanding them? And sorry.
Well, no, don't be sorry. Remember, we just said that. We're not saying sorry.
I do that a lot. It's something that I'm going to be working on,
It's a great question. And your hair looks great, so don't worry about the hair either. I'll say this. When I say, be careful what you bring in, I do not mean to imply, and I hope this is very clear, that we don't seek to understand. We absolutely seek to understand. And how am I ever going to be able to confidently express myself if I don't know what it is they have a problem with me about in the first place? So for sure, seek first to understand. I believe that wholeheartedly. However, whatever that is, that's what you curate. That's what you go and you say, what are reputable publications, books. And there's a lot of great books now, especially too, around the opposite of what I believe, that I can seek to learn and understand, so that when I come up against a belief that is strong, I can eloquently respond to it, as opposed to just emotionally respond to it. Because when I emotionally respond to it, they don't take me seriously. But when I respond with facts, and when I respond with a steeliness, which, we women need to own our steel, then we get taken more seriously. And then we have more ability to affect change. right? And, for all the men on this call, I'm not drowning you out. Hope you know that. I see Andrew. I'm only speaking from based on my experience, Greg too. But I think that's important. So absolutely find the opposite resources, curate it, ask for good referrals, and always seek to understand.
Thank you so much. I do really feel like knowing a little bit of what, sort of my opponent is going to say is helpful, but also, yeah, facts, always driven. Right?
Always facts. Yeah. Agreed.
That's it. That's awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah. And we've got one last question that we've got enough time for, because I do want to make sure that we respect our time commitment, because I've got a couple things I want to say here at the end. And so we'll bring Kamala in, and we'll get her to ask the question. It is a she, her, right? I just want to make sure I got the pronouns right.
Thanks, Greg. Awesome. And thank you, Teresa. I'm going to declare I am the one client, and I didn't want to miss it, because I want more and more and more of the knowledge. And thank you, Greg, for what you're doing with Shared Voices. I just wanted a quick comment on deep listening and listening culture. I loved it. I loved listening culture and deep listening. Just your thoughts on that.
Yeah. I'm passionate about this topic because I almost get shivers when I talk about it, because I really truly believe that if we did deeply listen, and deeply listening to me looks like this: when the other person speaks, you hold space. You don't say a word back. You just listen. And I promise you that if you were to go out after this call and take that approach with someone in your life, it's a powerful experience, because what it forces one to do is not rehearse what they're going to say next and how they're going to make a rebuttal. And instead, what it does is you've made that person feel safe. So I honestly believe that we are all capable, resourceful individuals. We have the answers within us. It's not like we need to own accountability for how we respond. But when someone is hurting or in pain or wants a really big goal, listen to them. Just deeply listen to them, even if it's someone you hate. That's the hardest of all. Just listen, don't say a word, and watch the power that happens after the fact.
That's incredible. How does that land for you, Kamala, sorry. It's not lands well. Awesome. Thank you so much for bringing that up. And I think it's an excellent note upon which we can end. Teresa, I think this has been a really powerful and incredible conversation. I've learned so much. I have come to understand that I think that you and I actually share a lot of perspectives, and definitely the kinds of conversations that I would love to continue to have with you in the future. Just before we wrap up, I want to provide something for the folks who've been here. Now, what we're doing with VoiceShare is just providing a space and an opportunity for folks to be part of what we're doing. And so I want to give you folks who are here a little bit of a gift. So if you were here and there was something that you saw that was really empowering and impactful, I would love to be able to offer you all a strategy session where we can sit, we can unpack, explore your issues, we can go through all of this, I can offer some strategies for success. If this is something that's of interest to you, I'm going to get my friend Renee, who's helping us with today, to just note down your name. Just type yes right into the chat box right now and let us know that you're interested in potentially doing something like this. This is a deep value, something that I take a 90-minute sessions, usually $250 value, that I would love to offer to some of you folks in order to help you to move forward in your business and in your work world. And so if you really want to do that, just type yes into the box. This is great. Teresa, if there was just one thing that a couple things you just wanted to say in summary, like, please feel free and share that with folks here right now.
I want to end, so masterfully like, Obama, but I'm certainly not him, so I won't be able to do that. But what I will say is, just like the title of this voice share, the segment is, like, your voice is important. Share it. Be convicted. Know your boundaries. You have important things to say. You just have to believe it. Just believe it.
Amazing. Just make sure you all believe, and best believe, that Teresa brought the noise, she brought the perspective, and she brought the insight for everybody here today. So glad you were able to join us, whether you were here live or if you're now watching this on the replay. Thank you for being part of this. Shared Voices in Conversation is something that we have that comes up on the first Wednesday of every other month. So look out for the next one that's going to be beginning of November. The guest that we have lined up for that is unbelievable. Just wait until I drop that for you folks. And in the meantime, follow us on LinkedIn at VoiceShare Inc. or through our Facebook group, which is Shared Voices, and follow along with what we're doing. I just want to take another opportunity to say thank you to Teresa for being here, for helping to make this event amazing. It is 1 o'clock, so we're going to make sure that we honor our time. And I'm just going to say thank you all, folks, for being with us here today. We appreciate you very, very much. And we will see you again next time. All right. So I'm Greg Frankson on behalf of VoiceShare Inc. Remember that in order to share the voice you own, you must first own the voice you share. And please fill out a feedback form. I'll be posting that information too. We really would love to have your feedback on this session and what we can do better for next time and what you really loved about today. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great day and take good care.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Greg.
All right.
Wonderful.
All right. Bye-bye, folks.
Bye, all.